Great. Welcome, friends and colleagues. Let me get my slide share up for you so that you can see the beginning of the presentation. Here we go. Welcome to the 6th monthly installment of the Local Governments and Municipal Authorities Group webinar series, hashtag Multi-Level Action Delivers. My name is Cale Roberts. I'm a senior program officer with ICLE, joining you from the United States, and I'll serve as your moderator for today's webinar. We're happily joined here by the LGMA focal point, Eunice Arakan, who also is our global director at ICLE for advocacy and leads the LGMA's discussions surrounding the UNFCCC process. And because the LGMA influence also extends into the nature agenda, we'll be glad to be welcomed, I believe a bit later in the call, by Stefania Romano, who supports the LGMA engagement on or within the UN Convention on Biological Diversity process, and is the global coordinator for the Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature platforms. For those who may be new to the group, welcome. We are the Local Government and Municipal Authorities constituency who's been following the climate agenda since 1995, present at the first COP and many milestones in between here and now. Some of those are listed there on the screen. From 2013, we also represent the Global Task Force, which is a platform for influencing all UN processes through our advocacy. Today, we're more than 30 UNFC accredited networks representing cities and regions who intervene throughout a busy calendar to ensure that the voice of local governments and their leaders are heard loud and clear in and around the negotiating tables. You can also follow the success story and these milestones on our website. That's cities-and-regions.org, which is complete with a negotiations tracker, stories from the partners, and much more. So go ahead and bookmark that page. And then today's event, along with all of our webinars, are supplied to you in our YouTube channel. Today's event will be recorded, uploaded there within a few days. As I shared, you're listening to part 6 of this monthly series, and a reminder that as of this year, we've updated the programming to be 90 minutes in order to give us a fuller diversity of voices, many more interventions from our partners, and then also welcome in discussions around the biodiversity proceedings into this call. So a little background to set the scene for today. Please, transport yourself with me back to November at COP26, and let's recall some of our constituency's biggest achievements coming out of the COP. Primarily centered around this, theme or this, advocacy push for multi-level action that can now be considered the default mode for which we work in the next phase of the Paris Agreement. We finally have a preamble that, I quote, highlights the urgent need for multi-level and cooperative action. This may only be a phrase, but you all will know that that phrase opens doors for our constituency. We saw that on the way to Glasgow, 60 countries brought more ambitious climate targets, with many predicating their ability to raise ambition on the fact that their national governments were working in close collaboration with local and regional authorities. More than 1,000 cities and regions pledged climate neutrality and are already setting interim climate targets to reach those goals. Moreover, outcomes from the Glasgow Food Declaration, the Edinburgh Biodiversity Declaration, Global Subnational Fund, and many more pointed toward an all-hands-on-deck climate emergency mode that reaches across themes. Yet the global community is not quite there yet. Most NDCs are not compatible with a 1.5-degree future. None are legally binding or enforced, so cities and regions will need to really press forward on the road to COP27 and are the front lines, where this work is done. We did secure a very large mobilization during COP26, more than 400 local and subnational delegates, and that was all thanks to you. To you joining the call today. Looking ahead to COP27, we're ready to scale up in the Blue Zone. Important relationship building is advancing with the Egyptian government, and our relationship with Scotland continues so that we can have a strong showing in Sharm el-Sheikh to usher in the climate emergency mode the world needs, built on multi-level action. I'll now yield the floor to our panelists and guests, beginning with Yunus Arakan. So Yunus, over to you, please.
Thank you, Kale. Thanks for the moderation and the introduction. This is a really nice collaboration from different offices of ICLEI. I'm based in Bonn, and you're connecting from New York. And then Stefania will connect from Rome. So that is the new world. This is the connected digital world. As you have said, we are now building on our achievements in Glasgow. And in particular now, what we are saying is that we have to advance our work in the logic that if this is the implementation mode, we have to make sure that multi-level action delivers. In 4 main areas. The first one is, as you said, NDCs. Should be brought. New NDCs should be brought. This is a decision from COP. It is not very common because the NDCs are usually expected to be developed every 5 years. But in Glasgow, there was a special decision. Originally, this was a very positive thing. But as you all know, starting from the beginning of the year, the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion has disturbed significantly the global connections and the global processes on food, energy, trade. We are significantly worried that even those are actively involved in the climate space as an ambitious agenda, these countries are even starting to track back their commitments, and they're going back to fossil fuels or even nuclear. So there is a need for us to push the NDCs to be more compatible with climate action, in the Paris Agreement. And we should definitely show that they can do it with the commitments embedded into their processes. Therefore, our work is even more important nowadays. Second, as you said, climate emergency was not not addressed in Glasgow. It was a good continuation of the Glasgow and the Paris Agreement in the second phase, but it was not in the emergency mode. So how do we achieve this? We would like to bring our concrete suggestions on topics on food, culture, circularity, lifestyles, waste and consumption. These are the topics that we really want to make sure these are underlined, and these are the root causes of the rise of emissions, or the fact that we cannot be resilient and if we do not change these practices. We would like to particularly build upon the work that is kicked off by Scotland and Wallonia on the loss and damage, the climate justice agenda that we have to address. The third point, which is really very exciting now, we will discuss it today, that we had been asking for a call for climate and urbanization for a long time. This was finally heard by UN Habitat Executive Board in March, and during the UN conference in Bonn, there had been some progress on that. We will touch upon this, but we're extremely confident that this dream of having a climate and urbanization minister is on the way, and it will happen soon. And finally, of course, we are in Egypt. Egypt is an African country, but as equally, it's a Mediterranean country, a Middle East country as well. So let's also plan before going to the negotiations in Bonn last 2 weeks. It may be good to recap our engagement channels once again. This is essential because we are saying that we're in the second phase of the Paris Agreement. Obviously, we will see in the agendas that the discussions on the implementation is taking more pace, but there's still rooms for negotiations. So we have to be aware of our channels and we have to make use of them effectively. And the logic is that none of them are replacing the other. So we have to act on all these 4 areas and we have to make use of our resources effectively. The first one, into the negotiations, which means to design the Article 6.8, which is a non-market mechanism, or to define a global goal on adaptation. There is still a lot of views to be communicated to the process, and this can only be done through the LGMA constituency. We are given spatial authorities to submit our verbal or written inputs. We are able to nominate our speakers. We are having this coordination year-round, and that at the end of the year, finally, we will have probably an annual multi-level action pavilion building on the success from Glasgow. So that's still an important resource for us. Secondly, action agenda. As you remember from the Paris Agreement, the Marrakesh Partnership, high-level climate action champions, they are advancing. Their agenda is evolving. They're introducing new concepts. But the difference is that this is a community that is not based on the constituency, which means it is not necessarily that local government and regional governments are one caucus. Just on the contrary, we have human settlements, we have buildings, we have transport, we have waste community, we have ocean, and there, local governments or regional governments are interacting with other stakeholders, like business, like civil society. So it's a multi-stakeholder process that we have to sometimes negotiate or even agree and make consensus with them. But it is an important agenda because they are expanding our work with the commitments, with the races. These are the processes that really drives ambitious action. The third that we are now discussing is the work that the presidencies are handling. This was always an authority that they have under their own prerogative, that they introduce new ideas. But especially with the Paris Agreement, every presidency is trying to introduce a couple of more initiatives, a couple of new concepts. This is particularly because there is no enforcement mechanism for the Paris Agreement. It's not like Kyoto Protocol that we have a compliance committee. Therefore, ambition can only be raised by new partnerships, new collaborations, and that is, of course, has its advantages because it can wrap up immediately, but it can also fade out rapidly. The disadvantage is that they may not be continuous, that the initiative that is announced in 1 year could not be continuing the next year. Of course, there is this risk, but there's also the several flexibilities. For example, these initiatives of presidencies do not have to follow the UNFCCC procedures, because they have their own authority on their own process. So they are free to choose their partners. They are free to choose their mechanisms. And it's up to those partners how to negotiate with the presidency or agree with the presidency. But we always welcome, and so far we have always been having good relations, but particularly in the Egyptian presidency, things are also evolving into a new era. I will touch upon that. And then finally, we have the Friends of Multi-Level Action, the countries who support the multi-level action at home in their NDCs or in their countries, as well as in the UNFCCC negotiations. These are our friends because the negotiation documents can only be drafted by these countries. They can only be the ones that could put forward the text that we've seen in the preambles or in the text of the decisions. So we have to work with them, but not just for the negotiations, especially to develop new partnerships, new initiatives, and influence other intergovernmental processes like G7, G20. So our relation with them is very, very important. Maybe this is something that we should always keep in mind when we are talking in a UNFCCC engagement. There are diversity or a pool of opportunities that we have to all use together. Next slide, please. This is a revised agenda of who is who in the process. It's not extremely new. We have well-settled presidency team from Egypt. In Bonn in the last 2 weeks, the president himself, the president-designate, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, was personally in Bonn. He signed the agreement with the UNFCCC Secretariat, and he already met with the constituencies like us. Dr. Mohedin, the champion from Egypt, was also there. Minister Fuad from Minister of Environment was not in Bonn, but she's still with her team engaged in the process. What was new that was on the couple of weeks is that both the presidency, Minister of Foreign Affairs and his team, as well as high-level climate action champion, announced their priorities. You can notice there are some overlaps, but there are some also differentiation, and this is also normal. COP27 presidency followed the same 4 themes that was announced by the UK: mitigation, adaptation, finance, and collaboration. And they also made a list of the themes that they would like to invest in terms of initiatives and capacities. We will touch upon this as well. In the meantime, the action agenda responsible, the Dr. Mohedin, also have developed certain a bit different agendas. For example, integration of this action agenda with also the other sectors, or finance in the sense that not just this 100 billion, but bringing philanthropic money, bringing the private money into this process. Regionalization is connecting to the regional climate weeks. And more importantly, the term localization is officially now on the table. Of course, the understanding of the localization from the Egyptian side is it's not just local and regional governments, but also local communities. But it is also true, since Local Agenda 21, since SDGs, the term localization was always stronger or effective with the engagement of local and regional governments as the closest levels of governments to the people. Therefore, we will be strongly connected to these efforts. Okay, maybe let's go to the next slide. I will spend some more time here because this is what was happened in the last 2 weeks. We tried to keep you informed through our mailings. We also have a WhatsApp group within the LGMA, and we will be keeping this WhatsApp group open towards Sharm el-Sheikh as well. Obviously, this was the first time after 3 years that the negotiations came in person in Bonn. This is, of course, something new. There's still hybrid elements, but primarily negotiations were in person. Throughout this 2 weeks, there were a number of workshops which was focusing on the implementation details. Unfortunately, due to our capacity in terms of being present in Bonn at that moment, but also expertise, we were not exactly engaged in all of those. But there were a couple of agendas that we were particularly very, very active. One of them is Article 6.8. This is the process, is just the new financing mechanism, which is particularly important for developing countries. And in that agenda, since Glasgow, we're pushing the idea of sustainable integrated urban and territorial development as a non-market approach. In that sense, one of the members of the LGMA constituency, UN Capital Development Fund, they had made it to reserve a slot in the workshop. They made a very successful presentation, which was focusing on their own initiative, which is the local facility, the local climate adaptive facility, which is focusing on the least developed countries and primarily on rural and urban development, but in particular on adaptation. Obviously, sustainable urban development is beyond LDCs. It's a phenomenon that is across the world, be it north or be it the south, and it is more than adaptation. However, we are well aware that UN Capital Development Fund, as a UN agency, have managed to bring a number of national governments from the LDCs, and they have strongly advocated for this as an entry point, or let's say pilot process. We as ICLE made a verbal intervention at the workshop, expressing our support to this efforts, but particularly mentioned that we could use local as an entry, as a beginning, and then we can build up other broader concept of sustainable urbanization, so that we do not compete with each other, but complement each other. Other events, I mean, we had delivered our statements at the opening and the closing remarks. After this webinar, when we share with you the slides, you will see the links to all these interventions, so that you can also watch them, and we will make the documents also available. There was special moments, emotional moments. There was a farewell to UNFCCC Executive Secretary Patricia Spinoza. This was her last event of UNFCCC where she chairs the process. She is stepping down, and a new assignment will come soon. Especially the observers, including LGMA, we demonstrated a very strong solidarity to the work that that Patricia has done, not just during her executive secretary role, but also especially from Cancun onwards, when she was chairing the COP in Cancun in 2016, in 2010, sorry, in COP16. She was instrumental. That was introducing the first COP decision for cities, and it is really to make this build this further. We had daily briefings, this time less because we didn't have a pavilion. One of those daily briefings is webcasted, so we will share this link as well. There was a couple of side events. ICLE hosted a side event, Climate Change had a press conference, and UN Capital Development Fund had a side event. We had a special dinner at Bonn City Hall hosted by Mayor of Bonn, Ms. Katja Dörner, who is also the ICLE's Climate Action Co-Chair. This was a tradition we have had since 2010, when we were started in Bonn as the ICLE World Secretariat, and we have always experienced the benefit through the Resilient Cities Congresses to interact with the negotiators. So it was good for us to connect once again to the negotiators. This was also the moment where we welcomed and invited and made a new appointment, particularly with the new role that Ms. Sharon Dijksma, who is the current mayor of Utrecht, but also the former Minister of Infrastructure and Environment from the Dutch government at the time Paris Agreement was negotiated and ratified. Now she has this dual hat. I mean, she has a former negotiator and minister hat, and now she's a current mayor. She has already expressed her interest to support this, and we believe it's a fantastic opportunity that we could connect now into the planning or into the negotiations of this climate and urbanization. And there's no better candidate than Ms. Dijksma, who could be a leader in us in terms of reaching out to several partners, ministries, and that she can also introduce her experience as a mayor as well. So we are very excited with this post, and we will touch upon this later on. Of course, during these 2 weeks, our biggest agenda was the global stocktake. The global stocktake is an important element of the Paris Agreement. It is an opportunity to raise ambition, and the process started last year already, but we have already communicated that the current design, or the design until this Bonn session, was only focusing to the UNFCCC events in COPs or in Bonn. We were always saying that, why don't we be making ourselves inspired by the Talanoa dialogue? Let's remember, Talanoa dialogue was also a one-off event. And it was us, again, LGMA and many others, made it year-round. And it was Talanoa dialogues taking place in more than 40 countries and 60 sessions of cities and regions Talanoa dialogues. It was not small, because the mobilization of actors at the national level helped the national governments to bring more ambitious NDCs or raise their ambitions on the way to Glasgow. So without Talanoa, we wouldn't achieve Glasgow results. So we are making the same analogy that if we are going to the climate emergency mode, if Glasgow couldn't achieve this, let's make use of global stocktake, that it could open the doors for us for a climate emergency mode of action. And that's why we have pushed throughout these 2 weeks to make this an official mandate from the UNFCCC. And the good news is that the conclusions as a result of the process made a very explicit reference that anyone, parties and non-parties, are encouraged to convene local, national, and regional stocktake efforts, which will be a support to the global effort. This is now opening us a huge door. During these 3 days or 5 days, we as a constituency were already there. We had ICLE, Committee of the Region, City of Bonn, FMDV, Global Covenant of Mayors, Under 2 Coalition. We all interacted during these processes in the negotiation rooms, but we now have to take it back home so that until next year, next June, we have to make sure that in every city, in every country, or at least in every capital, there is a discussion on where are we going on the global stocktake. So it's not a backward looking, but much more forward looking. And the difference would be that in the Talanoa dialogues, we only refer to the NDCs, which were outdated. The new reality will be that in this global stocktake, we will focus on the new NDCs, the implementation of it. We will focus on our own local and regional commitments, because during the Talanoa dialogues, our commitments was not that powerful. Now we are much more, we have thousands of commitments on climate neutrality and resilience. And during this global stocktake, our recommendation would be that we also address climate justice. In the Talanoa era, we were focusing only to our own national and local context. In this era of climate emergency, we cannot discuss this issue without addressing migration, without addressing loss and damage, so that the local leadership, the subnational leadership on these agendas can come to the surface through this stocktake exercise. And finally, on the global stocktake, the good news is that the next years in June, there will be the final round of this technical stocktake, and the Daring Cities event, which is addressing all the climate emergency, which has already been enshrined in the LGMA process as a milestone. This will now could be the final round, and it could be connected back to back as like in the previous years. So we could also have the first multi-level stocktake at the June session in Bonn, so that this could be an additional opportunity to raise ambition as well. Maybe Kale, what was the next slide? Let me recall. Maybe before going to the presidency discussion, we could check whether there are colleagues who were with us in Bonn over these 2 weeks, who were part of either the global stocktake or other discussions, who would like to share their experience, and that could give a break so that we could have their inputs as well. We could check, Kale, among the list of participants, those who wish, they can raise their hands and we can unmute them, and they can even turn on their cameras if they want. Let's give some time, because I know we have discussed with our partners. Yes, I think you see one hand.
Great, I'm seeing Andy Deacon with Global Covenant of Mayors. Please, Andy, go ahead and unmute and share your screen if you like.
Thank you. I only have an unmute option, so I'll be a mysterious voice from the beyond. Thank you, Kale, and thank you, Eunice, for the chance to come in. And also thank you for the opportunity to engage with you in the important discussions about the LGMA constituency role in the global stocktake. It was very nice to have the opportunity to be able to promote this local, regional and subnational dimension to that activity, and I'm very pleased to see that it's stuck at the end of the negotiating process. That's never guaranteed. So thank you in particular to Eunice and colleagues who are there on the ground trying to deliver that outcome. I very much like the way in which it's come together with this timescale that now leads into a process that will enable us to intervene in meaningful ways. One thing in particular I wanted to add was that you may have mentioned, Eunice, there were a number of briefings throughout the course of the Bonn talks directly from the IPCC authors engaged in the production and development of the individual working group reports. And having been involved in the negotiations about 15 years ago, kind of nice to see the way in which actually things have evolved, because it was very interesting to hear a number of major individual negotiating countries and negotiating blocks start to repeat back individual pieces of the underlying IPCC science that they had heard. And I would just add, from an LGMA perspective, sorry, I should have said at the beginning, Andy Deacon from the Global Covenant of Mayors Secretariat team in Brussels, then that we, together with the German government and partners from Resilient Shift, are producing, or at least are coordinating the production of a summary for urban policymakers of the IPCC 6th assessment report, with a round of regional consultations and a global convening to take place before early autumn, and then planning to launch that work in towards the end of September. And it will be important to be able to translate the global findings of the IPCC down to local and regional level, and to be able to use that to inform this stock-taking process. So I think there are some important contributions that build directly on elements of the UN process, in this case IPCC, that we will have an opportunity to continue to develop an LGMA response to, but then feed that back in quite a deliberate fashion back into this global stocktake. And I would say many of you know, just finally, that then the Global Covenant also produces an aggregation report every year of all of the reporting through the various reporting platforms and systems to the Global Covenant. We will be doing that again this year for the talks in Sharm, and again that could provide some useful information both about access to clean energy, resilience and adaptation, as well as emissions reduction. So we're covering multiple of the points of engagement. So I think there are a couple of very specific opportunities to use all of this marvelous richness of data and local understanding to really help to inform individual, national, but also regional negotiating bloc positions towards the global stocktake, and look forward to continuing to support. And once again, thank you so much for all of the effort over the last couple of weeks. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for the inputs, Andy, and sharing your perspectives from Bonn. Eunice, did you want to make any comment on Andy's remarks?
We can, but I think Teresa is also here from Committee of the Regions. Maybe we could also give the floor to her so that then maybe we can have a together discussion.
Great. Hi, Teresa. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I have nothing really to add to what you said, Eunice, just to echo Andy, and thank you again for all the efforts you put on this. There were two very intense weeks, so thanks again, and also for organizing the event on Friday night at the Bonn City Hall. It was very good to see all the networks sitting together, and for me as a newcomer, it was very, very nice to see all the colleagues. For the COR, it was very enriching to participate in the technical dialogues and to see how the negotiations work. We, as you mentioned, participated in the technical dialogue on the adaptation. So since time was very limited and we didn't have the time to raise all the issues, we are planning to send the written contribution that we prepared with Regions 4, as I mentioned. So we will do that by this Friday, hopefully. So if anybody in this call wants to see the written contribution, I'm happy to share. And also, as you mentioned, the next technical dialogue will take place in November, right?
Yes, it will be during COP.
And yes, so they mentioned, the subsidiary bodies mentioned that there will be another call for contributions So just for everybody to be ready for that, so we can start working early and we can meet the deadlines and we can see our contributions in the reports prepared by the subsidiary bodies. That's all. And thanks again, Yunus, and thanks, Kale, for the moderation.
Okay, I think, Kale, I can just briefly, first of all, thanks for both Andy and Teresa and other colleagues who were in Bonn participating in these technical dialogues, especially. It is really important because the more you are visible and heard, the more you can influence the results. And I'm very happy that all our delegation members have taken the floor during the sessions. They have made statements. It was 2 or 3 minutes. And let's remember, this was a technical dialogue in an innovative format that party and non-party were speaking one and after another. It was not a negotiation session where we were at the end of the last 2 minutes, but it was really real interaction. And that was innovation, and that we have always favored such things. Obviously, when it was in the contact group, it was different, that we had to sit behind. But when it was in the technical dialogue, I remember together with Andy, we took the front seat, especially to show that we are here. And I can happily report that we will share the links. For example, the closing plenary of the technical dialogues, the rapporteurs, each of the 3 groups, when they referred to the outcome, they referred to urban and local and subnational aspects, urbanization, sustainable cities, or multi-level action in all these 3 groups. That was really very good. And in fact, this made us to achieve this conclusion, this paragraph, which was inserted later on, that we built upon further, so that it is a concrete result, once again, that the more we are proactively approaching to this process, the more better we will do it. I fully agree with Andy. IPCC, it's very good that we will have this new summary for urban policymakers. Let's recall, IPCC AR7 will start in a couple of years' time, and the first special report will be on cities. So the more we give scientific evidence, the easier the governments can bring our information on board, so that it is a process that feeds each other. So we look forward to the GCOM process, and we will be contributing, of course. There will be a number of sessions already started, so this is extremely important. And in the case of, again, adaptation, and for all these 3 groups, we have made the inputs, so we will also share with our membership or community the statements delivered by our members there. And we will definitely have to catch the deadline so that we are in time there. One thing that is not clear at COP and the next year, whether it will be the same people. I hope it will not be the same people. We also have mentioned as a constructive criticism that the way the sessions were designed was that for a proactive, or let's say effective 10 hours of a discussion, one has to stay for 5 nights and 6 days in Bonn, and none of them are funded by the UNFCCC. And we said made concretely that the next rounds in Sharm el-Sheikh, they should condense this period in order to be more focused, and maybe even consider a dialogue before the UNFCCC negotiations start, because they will be distracted. And we even said, for example, we invited national governments to assign maybe global stocktake, just like high-level climate action champions. Maybe they can consider national ambassadors of stocktake, so that it is not the negotiators, but it is really the people on the ground who are discussing how it is working in the implementation of Paris Agreement, and how can it be turned into climate emergency mode. And this can apply in our sessions when we have this like Utrecht global stocktake, or Orlando stocktake, Yucatan stocktake, or Malawi stocktake. We can always also have those reports and those champions also communicate to the national and global process as well. So let's be creative, and let's use this really turn into a new momentum for us. Let's continue. Kale, the next slide. Yes. So this is a screenshot from the website of the presidency. You see here a number of themes announced. The presidency already made it clear that this is not written on stone yet. It is still possible to adjust, introduce new concepts, or revise the headlines. During these 2 weeks, we had a number of consultations with the presidency teams, and particularly one very open invitation was from the team who's developing these initiatives. Ambassador Ayman Amin has invited the LGMA constituency in the first week, where we had a frank discussion about how we can advance a sustainable cities initiative. This is a working language at the moment, but it is very keen that Egyptian presidency wants to have a result that could be one of the legacies of the presidency. And of course, we are aware that there's also a discussion about climate and urbanization ministerial. So this sustainable cities initiative could help each other. They are not necessarily synchronized yet, or they don't have to be a conditionality to each other. We may have an initiative, but no ministerial, or we may have a ministerial, but no initiative. This could all be scenarios that we can think about. It all depends how this is developed in the next couple of weeks. And in that sense, we have agreed that we will work with the presidency through a consultative process, an inclusive process. We will start with the first round of consultations during the World Urban Forum in Katowice, where urban communities gathered there, and we will discuss with them what could be their expectations. The good news is on the 30th of June, the Egyptian government will be very actively involved in the climate debate, in the climate dialogue. We have also secured Mayor of Utrecht as a speaker at this session, so that she can also convey our messages. And either on that day or the day before, which is still being negotiated with the Egyptian government officials, we will convene a small closed meeting, and we will of course share with those details with you. It's small because of the limitations of the capacity, physical space, but it will be a representative group of consultation. This will then continue with another round of consultation in July, end of July, in the 28th of July in Cairo, which is a special request from the Egyptian government that we have this consultation in Cairo with the parties and non-parties. We will continue later in Africa Climate Week in Gabon. And by the time this is concluded, we assume we are coming to a maturity of what could contain in this process, in this initiative, and that the hope is that this is released in a soft mode end of September or beginning of October, so that it is announced before COP starts, not at COP, but before. And the presidency has a clear interest that this initiative, not just for thematic, but also includes a mechanism for its governance, and it's a time span for until 2030. Let's all remember, of course, they are initiating this as a developing country, as a non-annexed country. The resources are limited. How much we will advance to this goal of a long-term continued initiative that is global and creating added value. There is a keen interest from all partners, and the good news, LGMA is strongly involved in this process. We will make sure that we are connecting and providing inputs to this process, so that it's a new model of collaboration with the presidency. And it's also important that, especially in terms of resourcing and continuity of this process, we also would like to make sure the parallel process like G7, like G20, there are numerous things coming up, and the initiative from COP27 could be connected. The outcome from World Urban Forum in Katowice, let's not forget, World Urban Forum will be hosted in Egypt 2 years later. Again, these are opportunities that we can all build on. So this is really promising and exciting, and we will make sure that it is shared by all, and that we receive all inputs as appropriate. Okay, let's go to the next one. During the SPs, during the Bonn conference, there was an additional announcement. The multi-level action pavilion is now starting to take its steam. The deadline for reserving spaces at the pavilion, at the commercial zone, is announced. It's 15th of July. It is costly. It is not cheap. It is at least in the same level of cost with the Glasgow space. However, we all know that with the Glasgow Climate Pact, with multi-level action embedded into it, with the success of the Glasgow multi-level action pavilion, we are committed that we would like to repeat at least similar, but if possible, if there is the available resources, even a bigger space of multi-level action pavilion in the blue zone as our home of subnationals. The good news, the Scottish government, which was the host at the COP in Glasgow, has officially announced that they will support financially and technically and politically the pavilion in Sharm el-Sheikh as well. This is extremely good news, that because with this seed and very powerful message, we could now develop the fundraising, which what we have done last year, but it is a much better in this sense in terms of its management. And also last year we were all rushed because of the challenges of a COP in a pandemic in the first time after 2 years. Therefore, it had its own difficulties. This year in Sharm el-Sheikh, we are assuming that it will be much easier, much better in terms of the management of this process. We would like to make sure it is double in size with additional features like workshop rooms, bilateral meeting rooms, networking space. We would continue to keep it as a hybrid format, and we would make sure this is connected to the events of the high-level action champions, what they have created as an action agenda space, so that pavilions of the constituency can also be interacting with each other. And we will also make sure that this is offered as a contribution to the efforts of the presidency for Sustainable Cities Initiative or Climate and Urbanization Ministerial, so that multi-level action pavilion, it says the bottom-up process of the constituency is offering its support to the negotiations and official presidency event as well. One thing that the slide doesn't say here, but the side event applications for COP27 is also started yesterday, and it will be concluded on Friday. So we recommend, and then we assume all the NGOs accredited to the process have received these applications. The application process is open for the accredited NGOs, and it's possible to merge events. And we assume there will be a good interest from LGMA constituencies as well. In the next couple of weeks and months, we will see a number of interesting points coming up, especially the Commonwealth Heads of State Summit, which already started this week. The weekend with the G7 summit, we are expecting both of these heads of state level summits may have reference to urbanization. Then we will immediately go to WOOF, and obviously in September, we will have the G7 Urbanization Ministerial. But before that, in Abidjan, we had COP of Cities in the morning. Jan-Francois from Paris gave examples of this initiative. We will have Urban 20 Summit in Indonesia at the end of August. Definitely there will be climate weeks. In October, we will have an Urban October, including daring cities in Bonn, Scotland Loss and Damage Forum, Cote d'Ivoire Finance, and also Climate Change Africa Summit. Yes, Andy, Clean Energy Minister will have to insert into this list C40 and UCLG congresses and G20 Summit. It will be pretty busy. And the last thing, and that will be the segue to our discussion to Stefania, is that yesterday, the biodiversity community announced and warmly welcomed that finally we have a date for the biodiversity COP15. It is end of December. It is in Montreal. It is different than originally planned for Kunming, but let's hear more details from Stefania. But before giving hand over to Stefania, I was wondering whether there are any points for clarification or inputs from partners. Kale, maybe you have tracked any inputs into the chat box that you may want to highlight.
Thank you, Yunus. The chat box had a couple questions from earlier on. I don't know, do not know if you want to address these now, but an opportunity that Eva raises for European cities to connect with Egyptian cities. Maybe that's in the lead up to COP or at COP.
Definitely. I mean, I think we now have to make use of all opportunities. I know, for example, Committee of the Regions is now drafting their position paper. Councillor of Dublin is seriously considering that she could contribute to this process. There will be European Week of Regions. I think we have to be creative on the way interacting with Egyptian cities. Let's see, but we also know in the governance structure of Egypt, the governors of the regions, I think it's around 20, they have more authority, and the Egyptian government is working with them. For example, the Egyptian voluntary local reviews, Egyptian cities are prepared in collaboration with the leadership of the national government. So let's see what is the best format. But of course, any idea you should come up. the regional climate weeks and should definitely come on board. I also saw your message, Eva. The UN side events are, yes, opened. This was communicated to the focal points by the secretariat. So the designated focal point has received this announcement a couple of days, probably a couple of weeks ago. But it is open. I mean, it's until Friday. You have chance. You can plan for it. Maybe Kale, we go to Stefania so that she goes on her inputs.
Yes, thank you so much, Yunus and Kale, for moderating and just giving such an interesting overview about the climate change space. The biodiversity space also holds quite interesting news, in fact, as you were saying. Next slide, the dates have been finally confirmed after a while that it's been like kind of uncertain and postponed and kept on hold. So the new dates for the second part of COP15 is from the 5th of December until the 17th, and relocating to Montreal in Canada under the presidency of China. Still, China keeps the presidency, of course. So we are already having inter and exchanges with our regional office in Canada and the different partners that we work with in order to be rearranging accordingly. Right now, Ingrid Garcia, she is in Nairobi, because as you know, from the Geneva negotiations, a lot of the targets with really very delicate, controversial technicalities have not really been sorted. So there has been the second round, which has been taking place in Nairobi. And Ingrid let us know, because we have a kind of chat among all the parties, that last evening there has been an intervention on the point be this to ensure whole of government approach, and UK and Mexico supported us, so kind of good news on the way. Also, I think it's next slide, please. I forget about the slides. I think I should give an update about the very interesting World Bio 2022 event, which just took place in São Paulo, co-hosted by the São Paulo State and the Secretariat of the Convention of Biological Diversity in collaboration with us and Regions 4, supported by the EU Post-2020 Project and GIZ, and organized by a local NGO. Now, the very important focus of this summit, which rather than a summit has been identified and defined as a process, is the focus has been to be accelerating funding and projects and initiatives, and really bringing in the subnational voice, on the forefront for stopping the destruction of biodiversity. So it's accelerating projects, mobilizing resources, and there have been 5 topics which will be brought in over the next months as a key outcome. There will be 5 additional webinars coming over the next months on governance, communication, environmental education, upscaling urban nature-based solutions, green and blue economy, protected areas, science knowledge generation and monitoring. So again, the core is the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework in the Plan of Action 2030. And this very summit is being integrated into the COP15 Part 2 and the 7th Global Biodiversity Summit of Cities. Therefore, also the Edinburgh process, Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature. Some of you might know that Edinburgh has very recently joined Regions with Nature, but also the Edinburgh Declaration. So we're really going hand in hand with all the partners throughout the negotiations. Next slide, please. Well, this is something that I have already mentioned. So the next one. So I will also give you a very short update about the United Nations Ocean Conference. It's going to be happening in Portugal over the next days. It's convened by United Nations General Assembly and co-hosted by the governments of Kenya and Portugal, and it very much focuses on the Sustainable Development Goal 14 concept and sustainable use of ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Next slide, please. Prior to the major conference, week conference going to be happening in Lisbon, we are going to be having a special separate session in Matosinhos, Portugal. It's a part of Porto. It's a district of Porto, and it's entitled "Localizing Action for the Ocean, Local and Regional Governments." And ICLEI is been leading the first session, which is about how coastal cities can be resilient and incorporate nature-based solutions to protect the ocean, but also convene the third session, which is about strengthening cooperation, building inclusive and co-management governance approaches to protect the oceans. So here again, it's about that this very session, the important point is that there is going to be encouragement for the national governments to be acting on action commitments, ocean action commitments. So I think that's all from my side. Whomever is going to be in Portugal can just ping us, and we're very happy to be either liaising with local partners or having bilateral meetings. There is a lot which is going on over there. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Stefania. I think we'll wait a moment to give the opportunity for our attendees to react or ask a question. Wonderful. I do see a hand raised. Let me navigate to this. Oh, it is from Kobe. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Kale, and thank you, Stefania. And I wasn't able to get everything Stefania said because I had to step out for a phone call. I just wanted to ask Stefania if you shared the very good news that in fact the city of Kunming has signed up to the Edinburgh Declaration as well. You may have mentioned it, but we are delighted about this news. If you want to elaborate on that, thank you.
Yes, it's been a recent news that has kind of going through all the different internal exchanges, and then just now made the kind of more visible announcement. That's a very good news that Kunming as well now is part of the story, and despite of the fact that it's not going to be the seat of the next COP15, it's quite encouraging to see that they are strongly committed to the ongoing processes, and it's really, as much as we had from Yunus, that the climate change processes are really worked out collaboratively. I would say that in this biodiversity space is not least collaborative, comradely. So it's Kunming and Montreal, it's Edinburgh and Cape Town. We're really working very strongly together. So Kunming is the very good news. Edinburgh is the other very good news, but Montreal as well, which is just looking ahead of us.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing any further reactions or comments or questions. So I think at this point, we might be able to end just right at the hour. What are you thinking, Yunus?
Just to add to this really excitement that Montreal will be hosting the Biodiversity COP, that's really a good news. We would, of course, wish to see Kunming, especially the community or biodiversity community. But I think this is a good collaboration in the sense that we are helping each other. Let's remember in the UNFC space, we also have this Fiji, Bonn, Chile, Madrid. We help each other. The interest is that we would like to make this process evolving. Let's remember, especially in the global arena, there are so many things that is backtracking us, so that it is important such events to take place, be it hybrid, be it virtually, be it in person. And the more they are on the agenda, and it's not just on the agenda of us, but it's on the agenda of media and the heads of states, then we can make sure the world that, yes, we should embrace sustainability in order to respond to those challenges that we are facing. So I think let's also remember Montreal was famous, also another host of the COP in the past in 2005. I remember very well these freezing days and nights in Montreal, but still very productive. This was the year when the US Climate Mayors Agreement was signed, and 1,000 US mayors was putting on the table that yes, they are in. It was before that we are still in. It was the Kyoto era that these 1,000 US mayors were saying that, yes, we will implement the Kyoto Protocol in the US. And that was a remarkable momentum. And that was already a starting point that bottom-up movement is influencing the global processes as well. So, and Montreal plus Quebec, they have always been very actively involved in this global processes. Of course, they are the seat of the CBD, just like Bonn and the state of North Rhine-Westphalia is important for UNFCCC. Quebec and Montreal is important for biodiversity, and we're proud of our mayor Plante as being our global ambassador. Jean Lemire from Quebec government always being the voice of our subnational leadership. So it's a lot of opportunities. That's why it is also good that it could also positively impact the preparations for the COP as well in Egypt, so that we can make the synergy now appropriately.
And Yunus, last but not least, Cities with Nature was launched in Montreal, right? 2018. So it's a kind of unfolding.
Yeah, continuity.
And yes, continuity.
Yeah, it's the same thing exactly. Let's recall. I mean, that was in our closing remarks. Talanoa Dialogues was kicked off in Bonn at the COP, and it was concluded in Katowice. So again, 6 years later or 5 years later, Bonn kicked off the global stocktake in a local level, and the first one will be in Katowice in a couple of weeks' time. So we are always making good connections to our host cities and making sure that their legacies are feeding our work. And this is important because the ownership is always, just like Paris, just like Glasgow, it is important that those venues are not just logistical venues, but also introduce a powerful momentum.
Like a butterfly effect, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Throughout is great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for your closing comments. Any final thoughts? Leave us with, or good to close? Okay, well then I would love to thank the LGMA webinar series. We hope that everyone on the line will be with us next month for the 7th edition. And until then, we'll be in touch via email. Please go to cities-. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.